Recording in progress.
Kia ora tatou. Welcome to this Friday afternoon informal gathering to talk about the way forward in terms of the future structure in terms of this committee or others. And I'd like to just hand it over to Oliver Haycock at this stage. Mia Dinya, actually, before that, I'd like to welcome you here, and it's nice to see you, absolutely, and look forward to your input. So Oliver, if you can kick it off. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for that welcome. I won't speak for long, but just to say that the joint committee, from my perspective, I feel adds huge value. There was a time where we required a lot of support to make operational decisions. But as a group, we have grown in terms of our ability to work collaboratively together. And my view as a staff member is that we now have a really good relationship, and we're making efficient operational decisions and working together really, really well. And there's therefore the opportunity to bring people together and have a discussion about whether we need to adapt the joint committee in response to the challenges that we now face. Acknowledging that some of the challenges we faced historically, I feel we've come a long way towards solving. And with that change, I think we've all recognised that there's the opportunity to think big, look at the wider strategic challenges that Tauranga and the Western Bay is facing, and what potentially a revamped or slightly rebooted version of this committee could look to achieve to support us meeting those outcomes that we have all signed up to as a sub-region. So today's session is by design fairly informal. Staff have done a fair amount of thinking behind the scenes to sort of support this conversation. But with your permission, Chair, it would be awesome if staff could take part in this workshop as much as elected members, so that we can give our views and opinions as to how things are working for us, and help you understand how we can best support you as governors in achieving what you want to for the sub-region.
Oliver, absolutely. We're all in this together.
Thank you, Chair. Without further ado, to enable that conversation to happen, we thought it was appropriate to get this session facilitated independently to allow everyone to participate. So we've got Peter Martineau from Vesuvius and Rowan, who are going to lead us through the substantive elements of today's workshop. As I said, we want to keep this relatively informal. So if anyone's got any questions or if anything's unclear at any point, please do interrupt and we will do our best to explain. So over to you, Peter.
Thank you. You'll have to tolerate my accent, I'm afraid, but I'll hopefully not speak too loudly into the mic. But thank you for having me. It's a real privilege to get involved in this. My background, so I moved to New Zealand 22 years ago now. I was a contractor before that, civil engineer. But what I did sort of after working with Transit for, I think this is where I met Mike actually, a few years back. When I worked at Transit, looking after the capital projects. After that, I wanted to get my boots muddy again, went contracting for a couple of years, and then I set up a small business, 41 South. We were doing lots of review work, strategic support, a fair bit of facilitation, not usually at the councillor level, but usually at the layer below that to get everyone pointed in the same direction, and also running a lot of lessons learned workshops. So that's something else I'd like to bring in today, is some of the lessons that we've done from similar sessions, and also from running about, must be about 500 odd lessons learned reviews that we've done over the last 15 years. So hopefully I can bring that to the session today. My job, I'm new to this, I'm facilitator, so it's not about me, the session's about you. But what I will do today is if we get into some rabbit holes, I'll try and pull us back. We've got a park board over here for anything that we think, yep, this needs sorted, but we may not have time to do it today. So please, I'm not trying to be rude. I'm just trying to pull us back to making sure we get the most out of the 3 hours we've got. 4 o'clock, it's Friday afternoon. I'm not going to drag it out till 4. If we can get done quicker, we'll get done quicker. But let's make sure that the 4 is our backstop. We get done earlier, then we get done earlier, if that's okay. I think one of the things I wanted to just pick up on, one of the things I did was jump into the TSP, and I sort of read through that, and my scribbles up here, if you're passing, I just find it a really powerful document. We have done lots of work with the councils, and what we've often found in the past, there's a big gap between high-level strategy and operational, and there has been a lot of work. I've just had a quick dip into it, but what I picked out over here was some of the, I think, the good words that were in there, the together, the working, the managing as a program, some really strong stuff in here, which I think from the work we've done in the past has been missing.
Excuse me, Peter.
Yeah, sure.
I think could we do a quick round of intros?
Yeah, absolutely.
Would it be timely to do that now?
It will be perfect to do that. But what I was going to say is when we do the intros, we just a quick, I mean, I've met a lot of you, but also what you'd like to get out of the session. So I think I've got a clear steer from the team I've met with what they want, but I'd just like to, a quick intro would be perfect. And what you'd like to get out of this session, it's your session, and I'll scribble up on the board.
Off now?
Perfect. If you're
right.
we'll take
so
it
I'm Rick Urak, councillor in the Arataki board for Tauranga City Council, and look forward to the session. What I want to get out is a lean, mean machine that'll pump out good outcomes for the community and what that looks like. And this is what we're sort of trying to achieve here.
Yes, Sean Geard. So I am Tauranga City Council's city centre infrastructure lead, but also leading what an optimised and integrated network across the wider area looks like from TCC's perspective. What I'd really like to get out of this is an understanding of how best we have our transport network deliver for the community.
Afternoon, Rod Taylor, Te Papa Ward candidate in TCC. Sorry, not candidate anymore, I'm elected. And I'm the alternate for this committee. Pretty much the same as Sean, I think, this afternoon, what I'm trying to get out of it. Good, concise statement. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, Andrew von Dardelson, Tauranga, Bapalindi Regional Council, but I'm Tauranga based and have chaired public transport for actually many years. When we set up the joint committee originally just on public transport, one of our prime aims was to have it as very, very lean and so that we could actually get really good interaction between. So we only had 2 councillors from regional council and 2 commissioners, and we wanted to get a really close interaction with staff, and because at the time when we first set it up, staff were very siloed and weren't talking to each other in our view, and I think it's been a really successful model what we've done. So going forward, if we expand I'm not at all opposed to expanding it into a more transport focus, but I want to keep that concept of very focused, lean and mean. So that's me.
So my name is Oliver Haycock. I'm the Director of Public Transport here at Bay of Plenty Regional Council. For me, it's all about understanding what you need as governors to make effective decisions and how we can provide that information to you in the most efficient format. At the moment, it feels like there's a degree of overlap perhaps between some of our committees. So working through untangling that web a little bit so we can all be as efficient as possible in the work that we do and the decisions that we make. That is what I hope to get out of the session today.
Good afternoon all. My name's Rowan Schwinn. I'm a Principal Transport Planner supporting Peter.
Paula Thompson, a Bay of Plenty Regional Councillor in my last year of local government, and I'm going to be totally unleashed for the next 10 months, so just watch this space. Ditto what Oliver said about untangling the ball of wool, but I have a fundamental question, and that is, how will this committee deal with the complex and rapidly evolving operating environment that's affecting transport?
We'll jump back to me. Nice to see you, everybody, and online. So I'm Sean Jones. I'm the TSP Program Manager. I'm an external consultant, just to be clear. And what I want to get out of this is a line structure. So I've been involved in TSP for a long time. We haven't had really clear political alignment. And so this is the opportunity to do that and to swim like Kawe.
Good everyone, I'm Tom McIntyre, I lead Transport Development at TCC. I very much agree with the Chair's statement. I think lean and mean and the most efficient and effective mechanism for the governance to make decisions that keep us moving at pace and for staff to support that decision-making process with good reporting as well.
Good afternoon, my name is James Denier, I'm the Mayor of the Western Bay of Plenty. I'm here, I guess it's sort of a bit of a newbie in that this is, the committee's being rejigged around and I want to make sure that the governance is right to help everyone and to allow Western Bay input. So it all meshes nicely with TCC. Thank you.
Kia ora everyone. My name is Mike Seaborn and I'm Head of Transport for TCC. For me, what I'd like out of the day is we've got a really pretty amazing bunch of people sitting around the room here. How do we utilise this to deliver on all that expectation for our community? And whatever we can solve along the way to make it easier to do that is what I'm expecting to come from today's conversation. So to make it easy to deliver stuff to our communities.
I think I can add much. Probably just as simple as we can keep it, that delivers the outcomes we need, all the stuff people have said, swimming like Kauai together, including TSP, including Western Bay, keeping it simple, as Andrew said, but I think we've got to acknowledge how complex this is at the moment, and I'd like as much as possible to kind of come into this committee that will not lead to sort of clashes with any other committee. So I think you're all on top of that, but particularly I'm thinking of these like oversight group, the major projects lead, all these things that TCC has that I don't think we've quite got our heads around yet. Just to have this as a bit of a core centralised place that it can all come and get input from all three councils on that and give clear guidance. Oh, sorry, Glenn Crowther. Yeah, Tauranga City Council. Apologies.
Hello, my name's Amy. I'm Governance Advisor from Tauranga City Council, and I'll be taking notes for the day, but you might speak too fast and then gibberish. So for the rest of us non-transport people, if acronyms could be said in full, that would be great.
Kia ora, ko Coral he toko ingoa. I'm the Manager of Democracy and Governance Services at Tauranga City Council, and I'm here to support you in your workshop today. Kia ora.
Perfect. Well, thank you, everybody. I think we've got a good list up.
Can we just check online?
Sorry, is there something?
Dean was going to be online. He's trying to get in, so I'm not sure if he's here yet.
Perhaps you can introduce him. He'll join us.
Yeah, so Dean Kimpton is the independent chair of TSP. He, I don't know what he wants to get out of the meeting, but maybe he can express that later.
Perfect. Well, I will just hand over briefly to Sean. So there's just a little bit of background. I know people have got different knowledge, experience around the table. So it's just where the story to date. I don't want to relitigate it, but I think it's important that we understand it, learn from it, and move forward. So a bit of the history would be really good, Sean, from a quick overview.
Yes, so from a Western Bay of Plenty sub-regional perspective, we've had quite over the last, yes, it would end up being 6+ years, quite a change in the way that the sub-region is treated as a whole in a transport and growth perspective, from the agreement of smart growth and the development of UFTI through to the development of the Transport System Plan, TSP, the TSOF 1 and 2, which supported the funding streams, and more recently from approximately 2022, there was this committee, the Tauranga Joint Public Transport Committee, which was stood up, and Oliver alluded to it earlier, to deal with some of the misalignment that occurred at an operational level between staff of Tauranga City Council and Bay of Plenty Regional Council. We do believe that that committee's done really well, and a lot of those weeds that were in that relationship have been addressed. So this leads us to the next level of conversation of how do we allow this committee to best provide value to the community and to their purpose. So this has been an ongoing conversation since about beginning of the year. There have been some identified problems that have, through previous discussions, been identified. We've got the complicated web of governance, which has been alluded to. There's that political oversight of TSP that has been through the Smart Growth Committee, but that's a lot more focused at that longer term growth perspective. And I think we, as staff in particular, need to address the fact that there is a lack of public confidence in the transport network across, at least at a Tauranga City perspective. So more than happy for anybody to jump in with additional problems. But however, through previous studies, we have found that there are some levels of intervention that there are for this committee to consider, and noting that this committee does just recommend to the parent councils. So a key step that we see as staff along the way is to ensure that transport has within the wider Western Bay sub-region an enhanced governance structure, which would allow for a scalable approach to future growth demands and future local government reform demands within the sub-region. So this leads to what we'd really like to have as our first roundtable discussion of what do the people around this table see as what is working well and what can be improved on.
I'll jump in here, and look, I put post-its. I know some people don't like a post-it. Use them as you see fit. But what I want to just pick up here is what, from your perspective, is working well, and what are the things that you want to improve moving forward. So just take a couple of minutes, have a chat with the person next to you about it, and then we'll do a quick round the table, and we'll capture that. So it's what's working well, what's working not so well. And I'm going to follow that on with a bit of a summary from my 10 years of doing reviews, give you some feedback from my side of what I've seen from the work I've done in the last 10 years. So take a couple of minutes, just have a wee chat with your neighbour, use the post-its, don't use the post-its, I don't mind. Just want to capture what's working well, what's working not so well. So give you a minute and then we'll come back with around the table.
Want me to go first?
Yeah, go on.
So I think from my perspective, I think
Okay, trying again. Can you hear me now? Awesome. Thank you. I had my problem was I had it to the headset, but we're okay now. I've changed the settings.
I've got that we have, I think, good transport staff on all three councils now. I think working well together from what I can see is. Oh, is this working? Oh. Okay. All right, here we go. Yeah, I was saying, I think we have really good transport staff on all the councils that, I sort of, not suggesting that wasn't always the case, but I think it's particularly strong at the moment. I think that there's good teamwork between inter-council teamwork as well. So I think that's a real strength to move forward from. I think we've got committee members around this table, including James or whoever maybe you end up appointing, that people who are passionate about doing some good things in the transport space. And I think that's going to be really important. And I'd also written down that I think there's a strong community demand that hasn't been met, particularly not so much from public transport, where regional council's done a number of engagements around public transport over the last few years, but I think there's a real demand from Tauranga's community and potentially, certainly Katikati Way, I know, to actually engage more around transport. And I think this committee could give, and in amongst all the other things that we do, there might be a way to sort of reach out and connect more with the public as well, not to sort of bypass all the normal consultation channels that each council does, but just to maybe push out some clear messaging around the direction of travel that we're going around transport. So that's something I know we haven't really touched on, but I think just having a transport committee could be a great way to bridge the gap between TSP and what councils are doing, and just to tell a united story around this. So you've got something.
So Peter, I'd really like us to see a joint committee being able to really champion UFD and TSP and really communicate the vision and the timeline and what's required to commit to those programs and plans to the community, feed into them from the community. So act as a two-way portal there.
Yeah, and there were, we had a bit of a conversation about how complex the operating environment is, and having a, the operating environment is constantly changing. GPS changes, funding issues come along, priorities change, but having this environment where we can jointly discuss those and come to balanced views on what is a priority and what should be given more weight or others. And sort of linked to that was that creates an opportunity for councillors to be able to understand the complexity of the transport challenge that's in front of them, and then take that back into the conversation at their home council and inform a balanced decision-making process. Does that cover it?
I think picking up on points earlier. I guess the power of this is to aid the strength of the team, but also your clarity of purpose. So clear mission that you're going for to change. All of the reviews that we do and the work we've done in the past, things have changed, we've never had a baseline. It's not like go back, but I think that's really a strong baseline that changes at the time. But a baseline.
We had a bit of a bingo on that one.
Bingo on that?
Just in terms of that room to improve thing around, there seems to be like a gap between the strategic layer and the operational layer. There's this middle ground that doesn't get talked about, which also meant sort of TSB has no home. And Yeah, so that's something that we would looking to improve.
Just to add to that, I think part of the conversation was that public transport committees, it feels very operational. And then when we go to the regional transport committee, it feels very strategic. And they're quite different in what you look at.
So I think some quite a lot of similarities, and I almost called bingo on this, but I just thought I'd add more to it. I actually think around the table there's a really good understanding of the strategic challenge that we face in terms of the growth that's forecast in the Western Bay. The scale of that challenge, and that we all need to do our bit to address that challenge. So with that added in, I think I'd call bingo on. We understand the long term, but then there's the medium term and what we all need to roll our sleeves up and do in that medium term to actually get on the same pathway to deliver what needs to be delivered. And I think in that space, there isn't necessarily always that alignment. And that is where the TSP is super helpful in terms of allowing staff to come together as technical experts to understand the pathway through. But perhaps there isn't the correct sort of synchro mesh between what's being discussed at a technical level and the political integration with that, which then allows that story to be told with the community. So at that point, I would shout bingo. Councillor Von Badelson raised some good points around sort of that difference between strategic and operational, and how there needs to be that sort of clear delineation so staff can be trusted to make operational decisions to work towards strategic outcomes and keep governance at that strategic level. And then Councillor Taylor was echoing some of the points that were made earlier around simplicity to allow us to get stuff done. So effectively not drowning in that treacle of repetitive governance so we can get some runs on the board for the community.
I think we have to be careful if we expand this committee that we don't actually bog it down. So we want, for me, I want to see a committee that is action outcomes orientated, and as Oliver said, we have to trust staff to operationalise any decision making. Rather than get into the weeds, otherwise nothing will happen. But there is a real risk with that as we blow it out, that it becomes more bureaucratic. So that's something we've got to be really careful about.
So we had that relationships seem to be working really well, which is very much a bingo moment. What we can improve is definitely the transport journey time reliability. I think we need to be fairly upfront about that across the whole network. And also we had our storytelling and that communication with the public is something, and with the community is something that we really need to be improving on.
I'll just echo Sean in terms of relationships. I think at governance level, it's really good. Mind you, it is our honeymoon period, and we seem to all good friends, but hopefully it'll be maintained. I know Western Bay has got an election next year along with regional council. We're privileged to have a four-year term, so we look forward to, in a year's time, to have you guys return and continue on those good relationships. So I think that's pretty critical in terms of healthy decision making.
Perfect, thank you. Is there any more sort of from Dean on the screen, or anybody else around the table that we've missed? So anything we've missed?
Yeah, hello everybody. Look, I'm sorry we had a few challenges with sound. I was here, I just you couldn't see or hear me. I've listened to these comments now because I've been able to hear them, not the individual ones, of course, but can I just make a couple of very quick comments? First of all, I really welcome the opportunity to review how we better integrate what effectively is executive or organisational oversight of a program that you have political oversight and strategic oversight of. I'm very clear of the difference between the two, but if we need to make that clear and give more confidence, of course, we are up for that. And there are some significant challenges, I think, with the TSP bringing all the parties together in the way that we've been operating across agencies. That provides an underlying and enduring strength to the way that you do approach these challenges. But I would love to get more feedback politically so that we can be guided by you. I think that has been missing. We have talked about it at TSP, but also acknowledge that smart growth has been very focused on broader outcomes, and transport is an enabler. So maybe right now is a good opportunity. This is our window to strengthen that relationship. So I'm looking forward to being online today, and I wish I could be there in person. So thank you very much for having me, and thank you very much for this conversation.
Peter, can I just make a couple of comments? Firstly, I think it's really important that we understand what we mean by governance, because I don't care what means governance. And with the agreement with the then Transit Board for the Strategic Roading Network, and that followed in 2000 with, of course, Route K empowering legislation, etc. So the story, yes, UFTI based, but it goes back even further than that, and to that commitment to the ring road. And sadly, it's taken a while to get progress. And frankly, given the operating environment and given the financial constraints and issues, that's the kind of conversation I think that needs to be had in a very joined up way. And we can't have the regional council through its annual plan saying, well, we're going to do this to operating expenditure when the city's expecting something different. So we're going to have some of those really strategic conversations, perhaps not in a formal meeting. But I was just saying to Tom that I've had to sit and watch your meetings, Tauranga City Council meetings, to try and get an understanding of your financial issues. Do I have to do that? Do you have to do the same? Sit and watch our meetings? God help you. But, seriously, we really just have to find a way to have some integrated conversations about the big gnarly issues, and the big gnarly one is money.
Thank you, Paul. I think that's really essential that we get that up there. And I think it's the importance of a united group here that you can turn together. I'll be a little blunt about this, we have done a number of these sessions, and quite often it's just about getting people to talk and to get along. You're a step up from that, and you're getting into the next layer, I think, which is the how you do it, which I think is fantastic. And we will come back and answer that governance versus advisory, because that's kind of the meat of it, that we get a bit of. And what we will do, we won't solve that all today. There'll be some things that'll be the next step. Because the other thing with setting up these teams, I think we often try and take huge big steps. What's the first step? What's the purpose? What's the remit for this group? Then you're going to add some detail to that. How it integrates with the others will probably be something that we'll move into. Anything else from around the table?
Can I just follow up from Paula? When we talk about money, the problem is we've got different councils, and we've found this in the past, that the city runs a much bigger budget than the regional council does actually, but the effect on ratepayers is all about percentages, and because it's got to be funded. So when we've have a problem with transport. We started off with 20, we got ourselves into the 40s. We're now creeping into the 60s with the thought of, in the 10-year plan, of hitting 90-something million. So that's a big percentage increase. And when you look at the constraints from a ratepayer point of view, what we're finding is that affordable? And so our council's having to really think about that now, going from 60 to 100 million for a city council who has, billions of assets, but they have constraints as well, but they're on a, they seem to throw, a lot more millions at any one problem than we are able to. So there's got to be a combined understanding of what's affordable from a ratepayer point of view.
I think having said that though, Andrew, the decision-making around financial investment has to come back to what's the trade-offs for delivering on a UFTI, because the whole guts of our growth strategy is connected centres, and the TSP is designed to deliver that. Along's come a cost of living crisis and all the rest of it. So at the centre, we have to be having these joined up conversations around, okay, what does this mean for UFTI? And does that mean we have to push it out for another 100 years? I'm joking, but that's got to be centre of the conversation. Otherwise, the whole growth strategy and the delivery of transport is not being delivered in that sort of, as Sean would say, that North Star. UFTI is the North Star, and it might just have to get pushed out further and further. Don't know, but we need the conversations.
I think it's a really good discussion, and I think there's two things I'll pick up in there. There's the funding and how that's all managed, and it's difficult at the moment, all the change we've had. I've got to come back to that strong foundation. But I think the other big one that we often miss, which is the efficiency and effectiveness of how we deliver and what we deliver and when we deliver it. And that's something I certainly picked up in the TSP, that's a very important thing, which is what's the impact if we have to trim budgets on one job, what's the impact on the wider programme, and that shared knowledge, shared understanding, and ability to turn together to say, look, we can't do this. I think that's the strength of the group that you got here, which is really good. It's going to be hard, but I think the bit we can really focus on is the efficiency, effectiveness of delivery, how we do that better, quicker, faster, moving forward. I think it's something that we often miss. We're focused on saving money on a forecast, not saving money at our feet sometimes.
And that leads very nicely to this discussion on purpose of this committee so thank you, Councillor Thompson.
Can I, sorry, just to interrupt, Sean, do you want me to do my summary first? Because it probably fits in quite nicely here of the lessons learned. If that's all right. So I think the presentation's there, is it? I think it's just quite timely. So this is I was asked to do a bit of a summary from our work that we've done over the last however many years is now running reviews. So what I've done is just pulled together a very brief summary of what the findings are, but I think they fit quite well with the discussion we've just had. So sorry to jump around a bit, Sean. Sorry, I wrote cat among the pigeons. There we go. Just to click through. So look, I've called it the delivery pyramid, and this is my sort of ideal of how you set up a delivery program, a project, etc. And it's kind of that having that foundation of a purpose. And it seems obvious, but we often dive in without it. So that clear purpose is essential foundation for anything that we're going to do. Pop in the next one. Then we're kind of getting into the people phase, that we've got good people. They understand the purpose, they've got the time, the energy, and I think what I've put up there, and also passion and excitement about what they're about to deliver. But if they understand the purpose, I think somebody said the shining star. I'm a big believer and fan of the shining star. We're all headed in the same direction for the same thing. We all understand it. Can work strongly together. And then we're at process around it. So we understand what we're here to do. We've got good people to deliver it. Let's develop some good process. And I think that's what you've been talking about efficiencies. I've heard the ball of wool a couple of times. We're going to need to untangle that ball. We'll click through the next one. But what we've observed, certainly over the last 15 years, but I think it's got worse over the last 5, if I was brutally honest, is that we tend to get it the wrong way around. We've got a lot of process that we need to follow. So if you just click through these, there's a couple of just do it. We've got some process that we need to follow. Let's get on with things. Then we'll get the people, who's available, and we'll crack on. And then ultimately we'll figure out what we're doing. I'm being quite crude about it. It's not that bad on every job. But what I'm saying is without that strong purpose, and I think you've all picked up on the change. Change is inevitable. It's going to happen. But a strong purpose, clear why we're here. If our shining light, our North Star changes, I don't mind the North Star changing, just we need to know where it started. And I think this is a really important thing for managing change. So I'll just rattle through these. but again, coming back to that purpose, so I will circulate these round as well afterwards. But for me, again, getting that strong purpose, getting a good team together, they understand why they're here, governance being such an important part of that, pulling in your funder, pulling all the important people that need to understand that, getting them on board. And purpose, this really is that North Shining Star that we've talked about. Good people that understand why they're here, what they're got to do, and I've put excited up there, that they're excited about what they've got to deliver. I think it's something with the more recent projects we've reviewed, it's kind of, people are a bit beat up, they're coming off jobs quite worn out, they're not, you know, I've delivered some big jobs in my time, and I'm really proud of those. A lot of the jobs we're delivering now would come off, we're doing reviews, they're over budget, they're over time, and the community are not very happy. These are not great outcomes for projects, so it's how do we get to do that? You need strong foundation of and good people to deliver it, who understand what they're doing. And then we're at the process around, you know, utilize existing process, but don't be wedded to it. If it's not good, change it, make it better, make it quicker, make it faster. Keep it simple, keep clear, but also hold people accountable to it. Quite often we jump to a process fix when actually it's a people problem, or they don't understand the process that should be followed. So I think that's for me, that's the icing on the cake. And this kind of fits with this triangle as well. Just click through this one, Sean. So really, I mean, training is maybe not the right word, but we've kind of got the people, process and training. Maybe click one more on there. What we tend to fix, and this is what I'm talking about, is that we jump to a process. When there's a problem, there must be a problem with the process. What I'm finding is actually it's do we have the right people? Have they got the right understanding of what we're trying to do? And have they been trained? Are they aware of it? Are they accountable? Do they understand their role and function within the organisation or within the project or programme that we're trying to deliver? So for me, there's a sweet spot in here, which is we've got the right people, they understand why they're here, and they're trained, informed about what they're going to do. So that was really and look, that was just something it's worth I took that photo from my balcony this morning for good reason, because I counted, I think it was 5 or 6 cranes in Tauranga, which I thought was fantastic. So it is happening. Your growth is happening, a lot's being done. And I thought that was just such an interesting thing to see, having come from Wellington where all the cranes have gone. So I think it's a great thing to see in your city as well.
Just Peter, I just might want to jump in there a little second, just to give a bit of a reflection about what it's like to be a member of staff in that environment. So I've worked in central and local government, you know, for a long time, and you report through to boards, at governance boards, and in councils and whatnot, and that process stuff is weighty. And you often find yourself writing papers, doing things, justifying pieces of legislation or assurance processes this or quality versions of that. And then all this sort of big process work goes on just to get to the start line. And you often can't get to the core of the issues quick enough, or articulately enough, or refined enough. It's not a lot of focus. It just gets very diffuse. And so what we present to you is this giant paper with assurance in the back end of it, but the actual decision is that big, you know, in the paper kind of thing. So it feels absolutely like the upside down pyramid at times to do things within our bureaucracies, and that includes central government as well. And I think the only times, the times that I've experienced success in this space where things have gone well is where groups like this, or governance arrangements, or teams come together and are successful despite that. They're able to look at that and say, yes, I understand why that exists, but we're still going to pursue the purpose, pursue the focus or the mission, and we will deal with that along the way. The process doesn't become the end goal. And it's something that I talk to our team about all the time. Our job isn't to create and to deliver the best process ever. It's to deliver the outcome. And if we can get that look through and cut through, we're able then to judge how much of that process we really need to take on. Because ultimately that process is just about how do we manage a risk of some kind or a problem that's happened in the past, and are we dealing with it? It's a reminder to not do things in a stupid way, and so on and so forth. So I guess my challenge to this group of people is how do we get ourselves into a behavioural space where we can have conversations like that amongst ourselves and make sure we do the right things, for the community in the right way and as quick as possible. And when that has happened in the past, there's been some amazing things done, despite the process and the bureaucracy that can exist when you layer it all up. and it comes from everywhere. You think our process within an organisation is such, but then there's other things that come in from the side, and then you've got to weigh it all up, and it gets very, very heavy. So I'm agreeing with you, Peter, and I'm trying to make a point that from our perspective, that makes it hard to actually offer you the kind of information and decisions that you need to have to get things moving and to get stuff done. So yeah, and what we are, I guess, asking here is let's create an environment where we can trust that if we give you this information in a certain way, we're boiling it down to the decisions you really need to make, and we'll keep you safe on the other stuff. And I think that would be my ideal that we would get to at some point, and that will rely on trust and delivery and getting things right. So, but anyway, I thought I'd just add that.
Thank you, Mike. That's great. And I often talk of these things as kind of that umbrella of protection, which is we all know why we're here. We've got a clear role and we're all together. And I think often it's kind of once you got that, you can manage up and you can manage to the side, but you need that protection in place, which is purpose. People know what they're doing. Any further comments? Because this was really where I want to flip. We've been looking back, been capturing what's going well, what's going not so well, some lessons that we've learned, flipping forward, getting into our purpose, what's this group going to look like, and getting the shell, the bones of that today. We're not going to fix it all, but I'd like to get the bones of what this group can look like today.
5 of us yesterday, councillors, regional, went on a walking tour of the city with your staff. And one of the key things that came out to me out of that was that they've had so much negative feedback through social media that they don't use it anymore. They're actually using these walking tours to actually sell a story. So, you know, there were some real enlightening things came out of that, and we can put that back, the same thing for public transport. One is that CBD has 83% occupancy at the moment. Now, we all see empty shops and we count them and we think, what, that can't be right, but it is actually right, 83%. So you can't tell that story and so, you know, on a Facebook page, but you can do it on a one-to-one as you take people around. And I think we have the same problem with buses. You know, they all look empty, but the reality is our patronage has gone, you know, we're at 3.3 million, 3.4 million across the region and up 22.9% for the year here. So 22% is fantastic. Actually, you know, we're sure we've come out of that COVID period, but people still bitch about the empty buses. And I do the same. I'm looking every day at the buses and thinking, how can we get, you know, what can we do better? So we have to be careful how we do, you know, when we take, because we need to take our community with us, but it's going to be bloody hard because I go to Sydney where they've got a really good transport system and all I see during the day is empty buses as well. So it's the peak time, you know, so it's managing expectations that'll be a challenge for us in this committee, in my view.
I think perhaps picking up on some of Mike's observations from staff, but also following up on some of your comments there, Councillor. I think from a staff perspective, it can be very easy for people to react to those knee-jerk views that might come through, and that can lead to politicians being drawn into that operational space. But what can get lost then is that commitment to the overall vision. So I think it needs to be that sort of reaffirming the vision, and then you hold us to account for supporting you in delivering that vision and making those decisions to keep making those steps forward, and resisting the temptation to keep climbing down to an operational level, to use your example, deal with the Facebook comments. Because it can be a bit of an echo chamber. There can be a lot of negativity there, and a lot of time it only represents the view of a very small portion of our community. Well, that's certainly my impression as a staff member.
Just following up on those comments, I think the best way to get clarity around what reality is in the city is to engage more with communities. And unless I've missed something, and I tried not to over the last 7 years, there's been no consultation explicitly on strategic transport for 7 years. What was, not pointing so much at Western Bay, I think there have been some conversations on transport, which could be strategic out there. Certainly the regional council has on public transport, but in terms of the sub-region, in terms of the Tauranga City plans, there has been none. And moreover, what happened in 2017, I thought was quite a good piece of work. And what is being delivered in Tauranga City Council's long-term plan right now is not what the public wanted then. So I think there's just an increasing gap over the years. And most of you have heard me say it many times over the years, but unless we engage and have consultations with our communities, I don't think we'll ever get to the point where we're all aligned. Because ultimately, the whole point of us being here is for our communities. And if they're not part of the conversation, and they've been explicitly, not just excluded, but explicitly excluded by people making decisions around smart growth tables and other tables. And unless that changes, we're going to get nowhere.
That's been a fantastic conversation, and it fits on my scribbling here. So my last night's scribbles, I don't know if you got the bit down the bottom, and that was my kind of interpretation about what we're trying to do. And it was a program delivered, what was it, developed and delivered with the community for the community. And it's kind of, I think that's such an important thing. And it's getting, I think, Council over here, your comments around, you had a walking tour. This is gold. This is active participation and getting involved rather than passive reactionary. So I think definitely that's where we want to be. And it's, I guess the next bit is how we get there. What's the team going to do? What's the structure of that to make it happen? So I think it's a really good segue into the next phase. If we can jump in, we're an hour in.
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to make sure that we moved along to this, because I believe this is really important to what everybody around the room is saying of ensuring that, and that's the purpose of this workshop really, is to ensure that we get a buy-in for a purpose. It doesn't have to be this one. That was for discussion. We've got the existing purpose up there for your reference, which very much talks about needing to be into the weeds, whereas we believe that it's a great opportunity for the governance level to step up above the weeds, set a purpose, work through a structure, which is part of this workshop as well, and then we can wrap process around it. And maybe that process, to Glenn's point, includes a bit more of a public forum, for example, but we can include that a little bit later. Once this committee then has its purpose, has its structure, has its process set, we can then take the step, I believe, to the committee setting a purpose for staff, for programs that the councils are setting, that are undertaking, and they're reporting back on the purpose so that we are able to continuously move forward and move to an ultimate alignment, which is what this purpose does try to look at. Taking the point, maybe we do want to write UFTI being that guiding star into this purpose, but we're just looking for overall comments and don't really want to get into the exact wording at the moment, but keeping it at that high level.
Peter, could I make a comment? For me, I just would like to see quite a pithy purpose statement, something along the lines of to provide integrated governance for the greater Tauranga transport system. That then implies, what do you mean by governance? And to my mind, there's three aspects. One is to ensure the strategic alignment, with the agreed strategy. The second is to monitor delivery, and the third is to assess and manage risk. So I'm just putting all of that under the umbrella of governance.
Oh, that's perfect. I think we can pick that up. I don't think this is going to be a wordsmithing session, but we will pick up these comments and that will then feed in. I know you've got a draft terms of reference, but I just see this as the feeding ground for that terms of reference, which you're going to develop. So thank you, Paul. That's great. Any other feedbacks? I mean, on this particular statement, I don't know if people have read it, seen it, but you are, and there's the big one in there. You are moving, I think it was the Public Transport Committee, and it's now the Joint Transport Committee. I think that seems to be a given. Any further comments on the statement that's up there, further to what Paul has said? A reasonable start point?
Yep, just a comment from us, or me. The area is the Western Bay of Plenty. So that means transport inside that spatial area. And I just want to make us, I pointed out to ask whether we are comfortable that includes everything.
Wording was Greater Tauranga, which I know will offend Mayor Denia immediately. So I'm not absolutely sub-regional, but just, yeah, if I was Queen for a day, I'd call it Greater Tauranga region.
I think the Western Bay as a term for the sub-region is quite well known and works, in my view, better than Greater Tauranga, but wordsmith it too much right now.
We've always used Western Bay in terms of the TSP when we've discussed it with a little W. So.
Fair enough. Okay.
I've always noticed people from in Tauranga are less likely to engage if it is called Western Bay than if it's called Tauranga Western Bay. Now, I know you can get into a very semantics kind of driven conversation with a small W and a capital W, but it just seems when you weigh up all the pros and cons of it, to me, the biggest thing is to get engagement or to get the message as clear as possible. And I don't, other councillors might have a different experience, but mine is clear, because I've heard people say, oh no, I didn't get involved in that because that was Western Bay. And I said, but in this case, Western Bay means, people here in Tauranga as well. But they know that often Western Bay does lots of good community engagement. And they go, oh, but that's not Tauranga, because it's the council.
All right, I think we need to jot down, we're talking about the same area, but what we call it is could be different. I think that's a given, and that's something we can pick up in a bit of wordsmithing. But this is really important, we're talking about the same area. Is it maybe, Sean, a good time to move on to the next couple, which is kind of that area? Because it sounds like quite a good time to talk about the slides.
Sorry, can I just make one more point about that purpose? Just jump back slide. One of the key things we did want to try and get in there was in that underlined part where it's talking about recommendations and advisory. Just making that point that the one of the things we think that this committee is going to be doing is recommendations rather than anything that involves approvals.
I think that's a really good transition, and that's some of the stuff I'm trying to get into here, which is kind of that authorities, what you're here to do. So we'll jump into that. But I think Sean's piece on just the area that we're looking at is quite timely. Just we're all talking about the same thing here.
Yes, so within UFTI, there are these strategic transport journeys and smart growth. There's also the smart growth corridors. So our view being that this committee wants to likely, because it's sitting at that more strategic level, talk about those strategic journeys and corridors rather than go into a bit more of the weeds of those smaller cul-de-sac roads where they aren't used for those journeys. So within that pre-read pack, the definitions of these were included. That idea being that we want this to be a joined up sub-regional approach, and it is those more local roads that don't include buses. So that, for example, that's where the individual councils and their community engagement at a wider than just transport perspective adds a lot of value. So trying to find that balance between what's mostly functioning as a transport network versus what mostly functions as a smaller and community amenity.
So any feedback on that, on the area, what the group's going to be looking at? Or are we comfortable with that sort of level that Sean's just outlined there?
That's a quick question, because this always seems to come up in all the transport planning that, again, like what's in the pack for today, where it lists strategic journeys, but it doesn't always match what's up on the maps. And I know we've been through this a few times over the years with the smart growth had to change the maps, and then the TSP had to change maps, and TCC had to change maps so they were getting aligned. Just out of interest, I mean, is that the map with the list? Like it'd be quite good to have a definitive thing where you could go to the map and you can map exactly what was on the list to the map. And do we have that?
Yeah. So what you're looking at there is a snapshot from UFT from the same part of the document that has the strategic journeys, which is in the pack. So if you looked at any one of those 19 strategic journeys, they will be on that map. The issue is that map shows all of the movement priorities rather than the journeys. And so what I do want to do is recreate those 19 journeys as separate layers on a map. So I understand the confusion there. And
it's just quite practical too, because I don't know which is correct. Like, is it correct, for instance, that Ngātai Windsor is a strategic journey, or is it not correct that it is because it's not in the strategic journeys list, but it is on the map? And it makes quite a difference in terms of getting to grips with, as just that one example, how that flows through the whole city as to what level we're talking about. Because if we're talking about including ones like that, that would be a different conversation to if we were just doing the primary kind of strategic journeys or whatever.
I think there's a principle here that we're talking about, which is governing at the right level of the network. So we're saying, we want to make sure that we're all looking at it at the right level, which is at that strategic journeys. UFT's got 19 of them. One of the actions that I've got in my list is to actually map those out. But then there's actually the detail of what are those corridors, how do we report on them, and that's all. I think that's the detail that comes.
But in terms of, just for the discussion, can we be clear? Like, are we talking about, subject to all the detail flowing through to us, are we talking about using that map as perhaps what you're really meaning, or the list is what you're really meaning?
I would say the list is the higher priority. The list is more clear.
So a bit higher level.
My recommendation for this would be, as a purpose of this committee, we're talking about the general philosophy of this. So a good example of this is that this map shows Cameron Road. Doesn't mean that this committee doesn't care about Fraser Street at all, for example, because Fraser Street is still a functioning part of the transport network. But being clear that from a general philosophy statement, this committee is likely want to talk about the transport network as it affects the wider sub-region rather than roads that don't affect the wider sub-region or those transport journeys.
My comment would be, I'd find that in a governance role to be very difficult. And I'm new to the governance role, so I'll kind of see what others say, because having had conversations with local communities already around this very issue, they don't see it that way. Like, they don't see there's a difference. They see everything connects to everything else. I think everything connects to everything else in the network. And I would think that it'd be good to have a transport committee that had the scope to look at whatever's needed to be looked at to meet the three things that Paula said around governance, and to get kind of hung up on a particular, especially if they're not always clear. And it's certainly never been clear to me what we're talking about. I've tried over the years to get to grips with, and it's always contradictions between different plans, different levels, different names. And if we had one agreed master list that everybody in the community knew, and they knew where to go if it was on this list and where to go if it wasn't, that would be fine. But if that doesn't happen, to me, we need to be able to have discussions about whatever road or whatever footpath we need to, in order to get strategic outcomes.
I think just jumping in, what's the purpose of having a strategic journey or a corridor or a map and things like that? So I think we'd have to drill into the purpose, the problem we're trying to solve with what your unease is around. And I think there's a communication and remit of the committee kind of idea there. The map and the strategic journeys are really a way, as we saw it at least, of understanding what are the main kind of customers and movements in the city that we should care about. as a focus. And if they're not quite right, then I think that begs the question on what are the things that we do need to focus on and whatnot. So do I think the committee should be looking at the whole transport system as one thing? Yes. But I think in terms of what would a joint committee like this where does it want to pitch itself at in terms of having the most influence and the most impact on how things are moving around the city, strategic journeys and whatnot, based on sort of customers, perhaps, the way to do it. And I think that's what that was trying to do, but perhaps not effectively.
Yeah, we'll take a couple more and then I'm going to keep us moving.
For me, this committee has to be looking at the whole transport network. So it's not just, it's how the strategic network, the key corridors fit in with the rest of the PT system. For instance, I'm talking PT here. So just because Fraser Street's not on there, that doesn't mean it's not the strategic network part of, but it is still an integral part of our public transport system. So I don't think there's any issue between the two. I think we have to be strategic, but we can still get down to looking with, how do we cope with Matua, for instance, do we put our big electric buses running around cul-de-sacs in the suburbs, that sort of stuff. So that's not within the strategic network, but it's still really important to this committee, in my view.
I think just further to some of the points Mike made, I think is when there are issues that require that cross-organisation collaboration. So when something stands to affect or influence a journey of significance that is likely to impact large numbers of people in the community, and therefore will want to be comfortable across the organisations that change is delivering against agreed combined outcomes. An example at the other end of the spectrum might be some road safety improvements on a community street that isn't a bus route. Those are still very important, but perhaps there wouldn't need to be the same level of interagency collaboration to deliver a vital upgrade for that community. Whereas doing the same sorts of works on a major arterial, well, you would, I assume, then want to understand, well, what would the implications be on the public transport network, on people that walk and cycle on that artery, on the delays that you might cause to general traffic. And that's where this committee, we as staff see, could start to add that real value.
Get in for a while, Leah.
Yeah, I don't want to jump down into the weeds too much, but I do notice on the inset map extends much further, and I noticed that in the larger map, the northern corridor kind of stops at Omakura, and I think it would be useful to have that strategic journey continue at least to Katikati. Yeah.
Look, I think it's a good time we can move forward and start to get into some of that detail about how the group operates. But what I do want to pull out of this, which I think is really important, is how this all fits together. And I think, Sean, you've got a bit of work that you're doing on this. I'm fresh to it. I'm going to big it up. I think I was able to understand it reasonably quickly, and quite often I do some work with councils and what the hell's going on here. So it's good. We managed to get there quite quickly, but I do think there was some discrepancy between this and how does that fit together, and making sure that you're comfortable with where that strategic level and what you're talking about. So I think there's a bit of an action just to tidy that up, streamline it, make it clear what it is, but you're operating at that strategic level. But that once you understand that, then when you're talking about the bus stop, well, does that fit with your strategy? That's the point, rather than there's a bus stop, where does that fit? No, we understand the strategy. We need to get Jimmy, James and Paul to talk about that because they've got the knowledge. That's what we want. That's that integrated team, that advocacy as councillors, which I think is really strong.
Oliver makes a good point that a transport network comprises two parts, infrastructure and services. And the sweet spot for this committee is where they intersect. So call it what you will, but, and infrastructure and services, bus services, enable the movement of goods and people. So to me, that's the sweet spot for this committee, where those matters are intersecting.
Perfect. Thank you. I think that's been a really good discussion. It takes us to that strategic level. I'm quite keen to just jump us up here, which was membership, how we're going to operate. And I think it's the difference between coming back to your point, Paula, the difference between governance. What's the actual role of this group? Are you approving? Are you endorsing? What's your role? So maybe I'm not sure if it's easier or not, but membership. We want to just touch upon membership. Is this something Ollie?
Sorry, can we just, I just want to be clear, because we will go from purpose to a bit more of that. What strategic outcomes do you want out of this committee? And my idea here is we agree a purpose, or we'll work on the purpose that and bring it back to you of what we've heard today, to ensure that it is as broad as what we've heard around the table. And then it'll be up to the committee members of the day to set those more, that level down those strategic objectives where what you see as the benefit at the time can really be your focus. It enables the committee to stand on its own feet and to grow with the membership of it. We also wanted to be clear of what this isn't, what the committee isn't, what committees there are, what functions there are. So smart growth is its own committee. It has very much a focus on the AFD connected centres, on the long-term growth. We've then got the different councils, and also taking into account NZTA, and we're not talking about removing any of their authority. This is very much a committee of recommendation for jointness and completeness, and also the RTC and the RPTC. We've also got the how it fits. There's a bit of a diagram on how Bay of Plenty Regional Council's committee structure is. It does show that there are a lot of committees, and the Venn diagram of how the committee as a joint public transport committee fits in with all the other different committees that it intersects with, and a dashed circle of TSP.
I will just add, this was my attempt to try and recreate something akin to the ball of wool that Councillor Thompson has mentioned previously. So this is very much a snapshot from my own head of how I perceive the various governance overlapping at the moment, and then where TSP sits. So this isn't an aspiration or anything like that, but I guess just to illustrate from my perspective where I personally feel the overlaps are.
Thanks, Ollie.
Cool. And I think I've referred to it. We've actually covered a lot of this already, is the roles of the committee, and the idea being that we'll look to set a purpose within the terms of reference, but it will be up to the committee members of the day to agree what they really want the roles to be. We've come up with some on the slide. I think there's been some really good ones included already. So maybe we do just spend a little bit of time to confirm, is there anything else that you would want to see as well as the roles of this committee? And we can, although they won't be included within the terms of reference, I would see that the committee would regularly discuss it and be able to pivot a little bit more on these.
I might just jump in. Sorry, you want to go first? It was just really about why do we need this, and from my perspective around, you get what's the value you get out of a recommendation or an endorsement here at this group. And it's going back to that idea of a partnership, and the way that you deliver transport infrastructure is critical to its success. So not only does it make this region an attractive investment for central government, it makes the projects and the things we do and the way we communicate with communities a much better proposition and a less disjointed one. There's a lot of value just out of that word partnership. And when we come here, that's what we're seeking. We're seeking to say we've organised ourselves in a much better way in order to honour the partnership, but because we know that the partnership delivers value. And I think that's the core of what you get here. Whilst it may not be a decision-making committee from a financial or a normal delegation type perspective, it can then travel into your respective organisations and then have that mark of approval around actually the partnership is aligned around this. And I think there's a huge value in that, particularly at a staff level, but because it dictates the way we work, it dictates how we communicate with and engage with communities collectively, and we plan together. And planning your infrastructure out is the best way to save money on it, and it's the best way to get a delivery and de-risk it. So I think that's what your teams will get out of us bringing things here. And then I think it comes down to after that, and to your first bullet point, Sean, at the level do you want us to talk to you? And we'll get that right. We'll have to tune that in as we go.
Yep. Peter, could I make a comment? For me, what's missing, and is the critical information sharing. And when I say critical, e.g., money. And quite frankly, until we actually can share that critical information, we're going to, it'll just be same old, same old. And so to me, that's absolutely critical, that this committee is able to share that critical information.
That's great. And again, that comes back to that foundation, strong foundation that you're all together. So we've got that one captured. Perfect. Anything else, just getting into this, for the discussion, the roles of this committee. So, Ollie.
I had a suggestion that I wanted to test the appetite of. So to what extent this committee wants to take ownership of some artefacts. An example would be when we come up to the RLTP process, which as everyone knows is the process for which we request our funding from central government. Should it be the responsibility of this future committee to recommend to that process what sub-regional transport projects should be included in that and their priority? So at the moment, that would happen purely through the RTC, but this committee could effectively do that sub-regional strategization, prioritization for recommendation into.
Jump in on that one. Thanks, Ollie. I see where you're coming from, but since when you come to the RTC, you've got Tauranga City Council and Western Bay Council. To condense that just to one view doesn't actually achieve a great deal in the context of the RTC itself. If we're condensing 5 councils' views to then put forward to the Upper North Island or something, that might be quite a useful exercise. Personally, I don't think going from sort of 2 views to 1 view to then feed into the RTC and have the argument all over again doesn't seem like you're saving a lot of effort. But I hear what you're saying, and there's an interesting point.
Wider comments on that, because I think it's quite a good example just to talk about, and I guess it's for me. You look at it, and always get strong your TSP. It's informing your RLTP, and you've got that structure.
Yeah, the reason that I'm suggesting this in terms of giving this committee that sort of strategic influence. Your opportunity to influence is to make sure projects that this committee feels are important get the best chance of achieving funding. So it was just that potential to make that one-to-one relationship, but completely take the point around potentially introducing additional bureaucracy.
I mean, you could do it in terms of the strategic journeys that we had up on the previous page. So that if strategic journeys are generally thought of as sub-regionally important strategic journeys, then there might be value in having that combined view for them. But I just think some of the other stuff that might happen elsewhere in the sub-region might not be worthy of going through big. Kind of have those conversations anyway. And I know that the commissioners, they talked to me about what was important to them, and we could have a fairly united front when it came to Regional Transport Committee and the RLTP.
Can I just jump in here, Sean? Would it be possible to just pop that slide back up? What I'm going to suggest, because I know we could go on this for quite a while, what I'm going to suggest is we take 5 minutes, just go back into our little huddles. Sorry. Oh, Dean, we'll grab that in a sec as well. Yeah, perfect. I'll get Dean's comment just now. What I'll do is I'll pop us into a huddle just for 5 minutes, just to have a chat about that. And what I really want to start getting into, because I think one of the hard things is going to be that authority of the group. What's it here to do? You know, what's the thing it's doing? Is it endorsing? Is it approving? Is it have a chat about that, and also about picking up on this roles of the committee, and then we'll have a bit of a feedback session. I think that's just going to get things going, get the discussion going a little bit before we take the next step. I'm also going to come back at the end, and it's kind of, I'm going to do a session at the end, which is what good looks like for you. So that's kind of what's a successful committee look like in a couple of years' time. And that, rather than doing objectives, because that's something that we tend to get into a bit of a bog in, this is kind of from your perspective, what would good look like? But we're going to come back to that at the end, just so people are aware that's the next piece we're doing. So I'll go to the screen. Dean had something to feed back to the group.
Yeah, look, thank you for that opportunity. When I look at the roles of the committee, one of the things I'm interested in us perhaps discussing, what is the relationship between this committee and the statutory entities of the various elected council committees. So we do need to capture what the relationship is between this group and those ones. That is going to be very important. TSB as a entity, when doing its job, has worked very closely with each of the councils to draw out or build consensus for the purpose of the RLTP. But the oversight of this committee and our relationship with it, we just need to tease out how that is now going to work. I'd be very keen for this committee, for example, when they come together, they're bringing the voice to the extent that's possible without formal resolution from various councils, bring the voice of those councils into the thinking and the guidance that we receive as TSP. That's currently not on the list, but would need to be for the committee to be effective, in my view.
Perfect. Thank you, Dean. That's, I think, really important. And I think a good segue into we'll split into these groups, have a think about the roles of the committee, but also what I've got up here is who's going to be on at the membership, what the authorities of that committee is and approval, what's its function and who it goes to. I think, Dean, as you've just raised there. And then the structure. So if we can get those sort of thoughts in a bit of a discussion, which are membership, authority of the group and who they report to, and the scope of how frequently you meet. If you can have a bit of a chat about that, then we'll have a feedback session in maybe 5. How are we doing for time? That's 2:33. I think let's aim for 2:45. If anyone wants to nip to the toilet as well, a comfort stop. I want to keep us going rather than having a big break. So that gives us 2:45. We'll have a bit of
gets reviewed at X rate, not our responsibility. UFT, also smart growth responsibility, it gets reviewed at Y rate. For TSP, it's a program that we need in order to deliver on those transport promises. So it needs to be reviewed on a regular basis. So we're suggesting 3 years, but on an annual basis, update and report on progress and make changes if necessary. But where would that live? We think this committee should own that space so that it's making sure that we are connected to the strategy which is enshrined in UFT. Also with the 3 yearly review, we can also align to the money and how that funding is or isn't helping us to achieve those outcomes. And as a result of potentially a drastically different GPS, what is the gap now between what we said we were going to do and what we're not? So from my perspective, we would be held to account to a TSP that looked like this, but actually the money looks like that. And so we have to keep making that change to move forward. So those are the main things that we talked about. Anything else that I've missed?
I think the authority would have to be a recommendatory committee. And then there's just the element of how much the parent councils are able to trust the decisions of the or the recommendations of their appointed members. But that's a perennial problem that all councils face. But that's where we see it sitting.
You talked about it as a power dynamic, which is staff. What committee do you send your paper to first? The joint to get the partnership, then go back, which could offend people, or the other way around, which also could offend people. So we just figured out we'd do it on a case by case and a significance basis. And if it was really hot inside a particular council, a particular issue, we'd probably start it there. But we'll just do that through agenda briefings.
Thanks, Mike.
Another comment is, I just thought if all the councils have the same cycle of meetings, I don't know if that is the case, but that's what I've noticed for us is that if we can get into a sort of a cycle that's regular, and I don't know if 2 months is optimal, but something like that, but if it had to be 6 or 7 weeks to fit a cycle, I think that's better, because what Mike just talked about is if something had to go, like Rod chairs a committee on TCC, so it meets every X number of weeks, you know, if it becomes a choice of where something should go, it just makes it easier if that can be aligned. And I know that may or may not be the case.
That's really strong, and I've just popped it up there on the, well, it's not part, but it needs to be fixed. But I think also the reporting fits in that quite nicely as well. That there's a lot of groups. Can you get some consistency, standardised with reporting, timing, all those sorts of things? That's great. Give everyone the moment in the sun. We'll pop up the group at the end if that's okay.
I don't think there was really a whole lot to add, was there? Yeah, I think from the scope perspective, we just want to really make sure that this has, a view on transport as the community sees it, not just as the staff see it, and also a key part of that scope is alignment and understanding of what the constraints are across the tables.
Also, we sort of covered the level of understanding by the members who aren't at this committee. So when we go back to our councils, one example was Councillor Crowther sent an email to all our elected members just looking for feedback and telling them that we're having this committee, this workshop this afternoon. And what degree of response did you get? And that's a concern about the level of understanding from the remainder of the council. So if we make a recommendation to the council, it might need quite a degree of information for the other councillors to get up to speed in terms of agreeing with the recommendation or not. So that's where some difficulty could end up. And earlier on, we had a chat about potentially some degree of delegation, not when we were talking about big dollar numbers or big strategic matters, but for your council mates to say, okay, we trust you guys, you have a high level of understanding of the issues, and within this sort of scope, a smaller scope, we're comfortable with you making a decision and not having to go back to your council to get a rubber stamped.
So not too much left to say. Most people have stolen our points. In terms of membership, we agreed with the first group, so 2 from regional, 2 from TCC, 1 from Western Bay, and NZTA is non-voting. Probably the thing we spoke about where there might have been a little bit of a difference compared to some of the other views shared was around sort of the approach. So at the moment we're 2 monthly. I think between the 3 councils we've got a mixture of 6 weekly and quarterly, and monthly for a couple of committees. So I don't think there's a cadence that works for everyone in there. So it's probably the amazing support we get from governance that we'll have to try and iron out how that works. But what Councillor Von Dalston and I were talking about was kind of making those meetings and sort of the reporting requirements as efficiently as possible. So utilising workshop formats to make sure that you have the opportunity to ask the questions that you want and have that sort of more in-depth conversation with staff around the core of issues rather than potentially getting lost in the formality of papers. And there's a balance to be had there. I think it's worth acknowledging that there are issues that require formal papers to allow that transparent process, that recorded process and evidence that that's been followed. But there are some things that will be evolving in their nature where staff will just want that ability to come to you and have that more free and frank discussion in a workshop format to get the direction that we're seeking.
Just adding from that, we discussed having 2 monthly meetings is fine, but make sure that the reporting is actually concise, and the way to get that done is to have within the meeting, because you do need a formal meeting if you need to seek delegation for action. So maybe you start the meeting with a workshop, and then at the end of it, or you work your timing how you do it, but you actually integrate in just a short actual formal meeting so that you can make recommendations to your respective councils. But it's really important that we don't bog staff down with big lengthy papers. So that's a key issue which we talk.
I think that's really strong, and it's that connection. And I think we always see meetings where things are solved. I think meetings are often where things are concluded and closed out and endorsed. There's a lot of work that needs to go in before the meeting. I think that's what we're talking about here, is that relationships, getting things ready. It's not a big surprise. It's not something new. It's something that you're expecting to see. It's really strong.
And just another point around the cadence of meetings. If this committee is going to have that sort of utilise that power to recommend with a formal process, staff then need at least a fortnight, more likely a month between those to then get into the cadence with whatever committee you're wanting to make a recommendation to make sure we have the time to report appropriately to that committee. So it's not as easy as just making sure it happens a couple of days before the committee that you want to report to. There are sort of statutory timescales involved in making sure that pass-through happens properly.
Perfect. I'll attempt to summarise. Membership-wise, so I think we had two TCC, 2 Bay of Plenty, 1 or 2 Western Bay, and 1 entity non-voting. That seemed reasonably consistent. That's good.
It's the 1 or 2 Western Bay that's different. So do we want to resolve that here, or are we going to leave that downstream?
Discuss it here. Yeah, and I'm happy to. How do you feel, Daniel, around having 1 member? I want to hear from you first.
Yeah, I was actually reasonably comfortable just 1, and actually it was Glenn and so there was more keen on 2, just for that fairness. So I'm reasonably comfortable either way. I don't see this as getting into a serious voting issue at the end of the day. This is going to be much more of a consensus-based committee, I would imagine. I can't believe it's going to be something being forced on us in some way. So yeah, reasonably comfortable. I'm minded by Andrew's words earlier about keeping it lean and mean. Oh, in fact, we did actually discuss having one member plus an alternate from each council. I mean, that's another possibility, but.
That's maybe a good way of looking at it, which is having an alternate delegate, so you've definitely got representation. I think it's important. Whether you have the same for the other councils, is there a third to make sure we've got the people there?
Made the point, I mean, I was sort of neutral on the Western Bay, just sort of whatever we collectively decide. The issue for me was if we have two from each council, I think, for TCC and West and regional, at least, the advantage is that because that's been sort of the pattern in the past, we're not reducing numbers and we're kind of able to have someone else to maybe bounce off. I thought that was perhaps the helpful thing, particularly I think for Tauranga City Council, where we're predominantly a bunch of newer councillors, and to try and make sure that everyone's comfortable with this process, because it's kind of early days for our councillors, to get involved in this space. So I think having two here and an alternate would give a chance to kind of make sure we didn't do anything rash in the meeting or whatever. That's to be perfectly blunt. It's just to have like people to bounce ideas around and to get a bit more buy-in from the whole team. So I don't know. Yeah, that was the issue that made me ask the question of Mayor Denia. But of course, they're coming from different space where they've got experienced team of councillors who've been there a while, so it might be a bit different.
And Glenn makes a good point. So I think if there is to be one member, I definitely want an alternate. Firstly, if I'm away for whatever reason, but also, it is nice to have someone you can just bounce ideas off in the meeting, and that you're not going off on a tangent that your colleagues look at you afterwards and go, "What were you thinking of?" So yeah.
What about speaking rights for the alternate? What do people think about that generally?
The problem I see, it lacks the nimbleness then. You want to keep it as tight as you can. So that's the only reservation. There's no problem, especially if it's in the work. If we're going to do it, like have a workshop with just a short formal meeting so that we can do any resolutions, then if it's in a workshop setting, an alternate is fine to have speaking rights. But if you're having it in a formal meeting, I wouldn't recommend it.
Any further comments on that? Personally, I think I'll be alternate.
Issue, the chair could just call on that if they wanted like 3 TCC members to be speaking, and the risk is if there's only the alternate here, then perhaps the chair might limit otherwise you might get overwhelmed by TCC and very little input by the one Western Bay. So I think to retain some flexibility around that would be probably quite good.
That's probably my only concern, is that because you could end up with one Western Bay, 2 and no alternate for regional, and then effectively 3 of us speaking from TCC, which would, particularly contrasting Western Bay, you could have 3 people speaking from Tauranga City Council and only 1 from Western Bay. So I do think we need to really reflect on that. And I'm thinking, like smart growth, I understand sort of operates the way you're talking about, Andrew, and Regional Transport Committee does, I think, as well. So I know there's plenty of precedents.
So with Regional Transport, Lyle always lets alternate speak. He's quite.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
In fact, any elected member he tends to allow to speak.
That's true. Yes. Yeah.
That's a preference of the chair. So
yeah. So look, I think we've got a really good point here. We've almost got agreement there. Who's in it? The one thing I'll just pick up on is your wider stakeholders. Are they involved? In the past, thinking of the key rails, the Tauranga. Sorry, I'm speaking to my mic. It's your wider stakeholders who I think have been involved in previous committees. So this was Kiwi Rails, but not this one. But they're not in this one. Great.
Yeah, they have never been in this one, but and neither NZTA. We invited them only recently. We felt there was a shortage, that was, so we did invite them, but as a non-voting in the past. But I think the other, your police, your rail, your port, they come into the overall regional transport committee, and I think that covers. I just think it'll get bureaucratic and.
Small is good. Ollie?
I was just going to note that some of those groups do have an attendance at the executive oversight group. So there is the opportunity for them to feed in at that sort of part of the ecosystem.
Keep us moving on. I think we see people getting a bit wary. The authorities, I've heard, endorse, recommend. General nodding around there, so we'll stick with that.
The delegated authority to, we don't have any at all at the moment, and it was quite a good idea. I thought maybe a small amount, just so staff can get straight on, might be worth thinking about. I certainly don't think it wants to be too substantial, but $500,000 or something, maybe. I don't know. I hadn't thought about it until it was mentioned.
Just to around a bit, trying to be nimble, like Andrew said, not having to wait till another meeting, which could be a fair way down the track for staff to do something, which is pretty simple and straightforward. So yeah, that's what I'm sort of looking at, not $500,000.
Just to ask a question around the logistics of that. So with the makeup of the committee and with everyone budgeting separately, how would you deal with a situation where you had two entities that were making a decision and had a majority to force the third entity to spend their dollars on something?
Can I suggest we pop this in something that, because in the other things with these terms of reference, they should evolve, they should grow with you as a team. So I think this is a good thing, which is the growth and the future and the opportunity. But start with, I think, endorse, recommend, and if it moves on, actually we can do better, quicker, faster by doing something there. This is an initiative which you can then implement.
It's a fundamental issue that always goes down, and it goes to the heart of good governance. We are all going to take structures out of sources. I'm sorry, this is a very, very significant issue. We won't deal with it here today, but at the end of the day, this is, in my view, one of the most significant issues. And look, I see decisions going here, they go there, they come back down here again, they're off there. It's ridiculous. And it almost speaks to me of the need for a unitary council.
I'm just in danger of wholeheartedly agree. Look, I think there's a lot that needs to be done in that space, but I do come back to that really important thing. You're masters of your destiny here, working together, turning together to deal with this. I absolutely agree. How can you deliver a programme without certainty of funding? 100% agreed. But if you turn together that we need that, you've got a strong programme, you've got your UFTs, you've got I always get the TSP in place, you've got really strong foundation and it's turned together. I think this is that hard times push people together or pull them apart. And I think what I'm seeing here is you're pushing together, but then it's how do you then go to the right people with your frustrations, not take them out on each other. That's
just to add along the lines of what Paul is talking about, this is one step as well along a journey. So aligning governance is really critical. It's not as aligned as what it needs to be. And so what the future holds is up to the committee and up to a whole lot of decision making. But at least what this is doing is aligning governance one step more aligned than what it is at the moment. It's a step along journey. Yeah.
Thank you. Then, so the next thing was about sort of frequency, structure of meetings. So I've taken sort of the bi-monthly at the moment, trying to integrate with your existing meetings and not duplicate where we can. I think that goes for reporting as well. I'll pop that over on the park, but I think something that is one of your next steps, which is what's the report's going to look like? How are you going to structure that? And we talked in this group over here about actually getting people to present papers, keeping papers brief, something we've done in the past, but it means you get that interaction, you get a discussion rather than being a big long paper and then another 2 months before you do anything. So thinking about things like that, but I think that's the next discussion, getting into that level of detail. The scope of what you're looking at, there's a fair bit there which I think we'll need to do a bit of work on. But I think Mike, was it Mike who had the nice summary? No, that was you. Sorry. That seems like quite a nice start point for your scope. Yeah. So I think we can flesh that one out as a scope. So I think we've actually got the bones of what potentially there to feed into your terms of reference. Open to the group now. Is there anything else we've missed here in that session? Bearing in mind the next bit I want to get into and to sort of close the session is what does good look like for you as a team in 2 years' time? You know, if you're all sitting down here, what would you be wanting to hear each other talk about? What does good look like? So anything we've missed from here first?
I think there's ways of working. And I think this comes back to the essential need to have the workshop format where you can have full, frank and meaningful, and Coral, close your ears around, call it something else, don't call it a workshop thing, because then we get into legoimas, but it's absolutely essential to be able to, in my view, have those informal, full, frank and meaningfuls before you actually hit a formal meeting. And look, frankly, I think the formation of the Joint PT Committee has worked extremely well at the staff level, without question. They seem to be staff appear to be a lot more aligned now and integrated. Governance, that's, the commissioners were very powerful. And Andrew and I would come along and we'd get whack, 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 whack. No, I joke, I jest. But, we've got to have a really good relationship, and it's got to be based on, we can all bring value to the discussions and debates. And that's what I'd be looking forward to do. So a way of working where we really share information in a meaningful way, we're constructive. So that to me will be part of what looks good.
Just wanted to test something, because I think this will really help staff in terms of pushing along the terms of reference to the next stage of the draft to bring back to you. If I sort of take what Mike presented around scope, and I think what Sean spoke about as well, are we comfortable as a group sort of agreeing with the principle that the focus of this committee is effectively anything that's within the TSP program of work? Because I think for staff, that makes it really easy to determine whether stuff should come to this committee or whether it goes to another committee. An example being in the public transport space, if it's a project that has implications for TSP, it comes here. If it doesn't, it goes to the Public Transport Committee. And I think those sort of linkages and those relationships are equally as transparent for the Tauranga City committees as well. So I think if we can agree on that today, it really helps staff pull the terms of reference along and get that clarity that we're seeking around what's in and what's out.
In theory, probably yes. In practice, I have no idea, because I still have no idea what's inside. Like in our conversations so far, we haven't really talked about TSP on our council. We haven't really talked about projects relating to TSP. All we know is we have an RLTP list that came from TCC and got into the mix. We have an LTP that looks a bit different. We have a current plan, which is determined by NZTA funding, which is very different again. And so I'm kind of going, well, I don't even know how to get my head around that. So in theory, yes, it'd be fantastic if it could all be nice and simple like that. But in practice, I don't think, and feel free to speak up from other TCC councillors, but I don't think the rest of them, to be honest, probably have as much idea as I do, and I feel confused.
Is that a key part of what you want this committee to be looking at first because I know we are TSP is going through a bit of a reprioritisation at the moment based on that. There was a view of that reprioritisation. This committee could actually be a really good place to recommend then to the councils what that looked like. So enabling this committee to be across that will assist this committee with working out what's in and out of scope, what is important to yourselves, recommending that up to the councils, and then provided that's endorsed, this committee is able to inform its own scope through that kind of process.
Sorry, Glenn. What criteria are you using, is TSP using for reprioritisation?
Well, at the moment, it's all technical. So I think to Sean's point, what we need to do and what we were hoping to test going forwards through this committee is we can only go so far as staff with that technical lens. You have to then put the political lens off the top of that. Just because something is the most logical thing to do from a technical perspective doesn't mean it's the right thing to do now for the community. So the opportunity to, I guess, test this new arrangement in terms of that political oversight and I guess testing our thinking with your governance, we saw as a real live opportunity to see how this works in action.
Yeah, because I'm absolutely struggling with how you would reprioritise a transport system network plan when you haven't got the financial situation anywhere near sorted. And I'm struggling with the whole concept of that.
I can add a couple of thoughts. I don't have all the answers at all, but I think as part of the conversation, we probably end getting close to the answer. So we did the prioritisation as part of TSOF or the RLTP. Since the RLTP, GPS has changed, and since then that has also the NLTP, National Land Transport Plan, has been issued, which also changed the funding arrangements. So what we had originally envisioned would be delivered is now getting affected by those short-term funding constraints and the medium-term policy changes. And so those drivers are the ones that are really affecting the reprioritisation. And I'm not close enough to exactly what that means. The TCC crew are, because they're the ones that are mainly impacted. On top of that, we're also thinking longer term, and we're thinking about the scenario planning tool, which is a whole different topic, which gives us the capacity to be able to do sequencing and delivery. But that's a slightly different topic.
I think, Councillor, it's exactly why we want a forum like that, because the change that's facing us now is significant. And so how do you reprioritise programs? So there's lots of steps in this. There's the priority, there's the problems actually, and then there's the solutions, and how you prioritise those solutions, and then how you program them. We've gone right back to the problems are still the same, but the kind of solutions that were developed in order to solve those problems are no longer fundable. So we are looking at a bit of a swap out between how we might respond. So that process needs oversight and a good thorough going over on a regular basis.
So how does that link, that work? How does that link with a city or a regional deal, the Smart Growth Funding and Financing Implementation Plan, all of which is consuming a huge amount of resource in terms of putting it all together, LTPs, annual plans. I just, to me, it's another ball of wool.
It's one of the reasons why you see transport people walking around in a state of shock, is because it's a wholesale change, and we are literally grappling with it. And we have immediate problems, which are year one problems, and we have year two problems and such. So yeah, we got hit by the asteroid, and now we're trying to sort of figure out what the plan is to go forward. And I think that we see this potential committee, as a way of doing that really visibly and transparently again, because it does change things, and it changes some of the promises we've made to communities and other things like that. So but we'd like to do that in a way that is methodical, structured, and very realistic about the constraints and whatnot we're facing.
I'm just going to interrupt here. Well, I think this has been fantastic. It's what we've seen as a committee operating like a committee, which is really good. Having discussions. I think the funding thing, bringing it together, getting an active programme together. And I think what we've just described is what one of your first workshops is getting everyone across the TSP. Sounds like that is the founding document, but we need to make sure everyone's across it, bought into it, and the reprioritisation process. And then we come back to Paul's really important point, which is funding will be key. And I guess that's the cycle you go round, and then it affects your priorities, it affects everything. So that's, I think, great to see. We're starting to operate like that committee. So let's park that, move forward, which I think, yes, you're onto it. And
Sorry, I just joked that Dean has his hand up patiently waiting, so.
Sorry, Dean, over to you.
I feel a bit bad now because you're trying to summarise the point, so apologies. I think it's a really important point. I think it's you, Paula, that you raised. What does this mean in the absence of funding? Look, all I can assure you is every region is grappling with that across New Zealand, so this is not a new question. First point. My personal view, if a priority is a priority, it'll remain one. How you sequence your work in the absence of the funding that you hope for is the thing that TSP in particular can grapple with on your behalf, and then come back with recommendations about what the alternatives are so you can continue to make progress. But for example, if the Connecting Mount Maunganui initiative, Hull and Hewletts remains a priority, because the funding's not there, shouldn't take that away from being a priority. It either is or it isn't. The question is, how do you manage in the interim? What are the very cost-effective measures that might ease pressure through that corridor until you've got a business case and a funding case that is able to be approved? What do you do through the balance of your program so you can continue to make progress? But if you start playing around with priorities, shifting number 1 to number 10 and putting the cheaper ones up the top, then you'll also confuse and undermine your ability to focus on those significant sub-regional priorities when you're front to NZTA as well. So I do think you're working here longer term strategic, shorter term response, and you're backing yourself to bridge the gap until the funding then becomes available. You've got a more affordable option. It's approach it with care. And you're not alone. City and regional deals, I would like to think that if you've got clear priorities, that they remain a clear priority.
Okay, thank you, Dean. I think that's been a really healthy discussion and just demonstrated how well this group can work together. What I want to do now, if we're okay, is just go around the table for one final time, or maybe just put us back into the groups just for our last 5 minutes, just to have a what good looks like discussion. That's how I'd kind of like to close it with the feedback from the teams about what good looks like and just agreeing next steps. So there's 5 minutes into the groups feedback, what good looks like from your perspectives. That's kind of feeding into what these objectives will be, but I don't want to go down an objectives rabbit hole. I want to get the what good looks like, and then we'll have a next steps, quick discussion on next steps and wrap up. So we're 22 now. Well, let's say 5 minutes. So by what's that? Yeah, I'll give you 5 minutes. Go. What good looks like.
Yeah, hopefully we can steal everyone else's ideas. So the first one for us was action on the ground. So having some actual tangible outputs from what gets discussed in this committee. A coordinated approach to investments. So in a time of limited funds, making sure that we're all spending in places that deliver best bang for buck. One vision across the community and across the organisations involved within it. Positive progress and sorry.
So what was that last, the third one?
One vision.
One vision, like it, yeah, perfect.
A clear direction to make positive progress. Full and meaningful engagement to build relationships between staff and governance. I've made these deliberately verbose for you, Peter. And finally, transparency for the community.
So, yeah, I think we had two real key ones. One was to bring the community into transport. So success would look like actually having people want to come speak to this committee about the issues that they see in transport and be a part of our journey. And also that owning and simplifying TSP governance and just really owning that investment priority.
And ultimately, for everybody walking out of one of our meetings to feel satisfied that they've actually achieved something and had meaningful, interaction and outputs from each meeting. I think that's really critical. Because I think if you lose focus and interest in turning up to a committee because you feel as though you're not really achieving much, it can be really destructive.
Understand the reality of the dollars question for the whole program, but across the partners. So we all understand what the constraints we're all operating under. The aligned view on what needs to be done in the next 12 months and 24 months, i.e. what projects are actually going to be delivered, how we're coping with the change in the GPS in detail, and then how that, is there any kind of opportunities for us to work together on that? So that's what the aligned means. And the last one is to review the TSP program itself in alignment with the GPS, and then consult on it.
I'll just stick these up. TSP has a clear home. TSP is the North Star. Increased community awareness of TSP and confidence, and the demonstration of value-add integrated decision-making.
These are really good. I'm going to share a story. I'm going to do it away from the mic. Feels like we're achieving something, and someone I spoke to Mike a couple of days ago, and I was ranting at the committee meeting a few years back, and I was called. Well, you don't want to hear this. Yeah. I was called up, but it was such an important thing, which I was ranting about. Why we were doing this, I was really getting quite frustrated. I was pulled up by somebody saying, "Peter, I'm going to have to stop you there. Common sense is not a requirement of this committee." It was very tongue in cheek, but it was very on the money, and it was, we need to bring common sense. Even lots of it today, but it's hard. You've got a lot to work through. But let's hopefully conclude together and get something done. Anything else that we've missed from here? Right, perfect. not going to let anyone speak then. I think that's a reasonable place to end the session. The big thing is about next steps. I understand there's a committee meeting on this at the 6th of November.
It's on the 7th of November.
7th. Look, I mean, I'm going to just cut to the chase. I think we're in a position where we can get some draft terms of reference together. I'll pull us back to these baby steps. So rather than it being we need terms of reference to be everything, the terms of reference is your start point, and it should evolve with time. It should evolve with your group. So I think are we in agreement that that's achievable? I suppose who's. It'll be 3. It'll be less is more. Look, I'm going to distill this down to the key points. I'm not going to write a big report, but what I wanted to do out of this is give you the seeds for your terms of reference, which I think we've got here. And I also pick up on some of the discussions earlier, which is it's not just about the meeting, it's about the discussions pre-meeting. So you're not coming to, oh, here's the terms of reference. There's been some discussion. Hopefully there's been some involvement and some interaction before you get there. I would hope you can have a draft there which is ready to endorse or close to endorse at the end of that. And again, that's your start point. And I think the other bit I'm picking up on, which I think is super important, which is your knowledge, awareness, understanding of the TSP and the reprioritisation process. I think there's another quite big action, which is how that's done, when it's done. I'm not quite sure, but those are 2 things I would certainly pick up as key actions. Anything else that we want to pick up? I don't want to overcomplicate it. Can I just get a sort of nod of heads? Yep. Draft terms of reference for the 6th, 7th, sorry. Perfect. And then I don't know when your session for the TSP, but I think that sounds like a really important session. When and how, and whether it's open closed, I'll let you have a discussion around.
I'm going to report this back to we've got our TSP governance group on next Wednesday. Now, we are proposing to change the name, just that you know. This is. Then we can do this. We're going to propose to change the name to Executive Steering, much more appropriate. We've got a small governance group, and really it wasn't an issue, but because it is an issue now, we're more than happy to change it. It makes more sense, and it was good that it was raised. So we'll be feeding back this session to that group. I did have a question, and I'm not sure who can answer this, but how does this committee actually physically change? Can the committee rename itself and redo its terms of reference and change the membership, or does it have to be a whole new committee set up? Or it's more for interest from my side.
Coral, are you able to?
I think we can make a recommendation back to our councils to change it. That's all, but it has to be confirmed by the bodies.
Well, is that correct?
Yes, it'd be recommendation from this committee back to the Regional Council and the Tauranga City Council, and if it's including Western Bay, it would go to the Western Bay District Council, and each of those councils individually have to agree to those terms of reference and the membership, and then it keeps going. One other point is, are you still comfortable with having the administration move between the Regional Council and the TCC each year? It changes depending on who's the chair. Every calendar year it changes, it goes through. So
I'm
you just
personally happy.
you hadn't talked about that, but Western Bay may want to decide whether they want to take on that administrative role.
I think that would be a good point. But also, if we are going with the 2-2-1 structure, then that may not be as appropriate as sharing it between TCC and regional.
Is it working? What we need to know, is it working for TCC? That's from a regional council perspective. It works for us, I think.
Back to the councils, then back to the group. Picking up on, so that was the chair and, sorry, what's the title?
So the chairs and the deputy chair swap over each year, and the administering council then takes over depending on who's the chair. So it's kind of a, you share the responsibility for chairing the meetings.
We'll pick up on that, and the level from the Western Bay side we'll work on.
But my only comment, and perhaps one that we take offline as staff, is with the change of administration, there are slight changes in sort of reporting requirements. So whether there's the option to create reporting requirements that don't change with the change of administration, but probably something we can discuss the logistics of offline.
Last logistical question, would councillors would like us to turn up and present these papers as a group? So or we just send a single paper to be discussed at your council committees? It'll be a co-written paper from all of the 3 staff. So we're going to write a paper that's authored by all of our staff. And we'll do the circulation at a staff level, and that would mean we'd engage more with Western Bay Planning staff at the moment and bring them up to speed, and then it would circulate then to the full councils for that decision that Coral was talking about each committee meeting.
Because of the active participation of staff through this workshop, I think you've got a fair gauge of where we are anyway. So I don't think there's a need for TCC staff to come to brief regional council and vice versa. Because I think you've got one guy online. Have you, your staff member, or is he not there?
I think we do. So,
if
this might be all very new for them. So I think some sort of briefing would be useful.
So if you, as Western Bay, wanted staff to come and talk to your council, I think that's quite reasonable.
Absolutely. I think proceeding much further without talking to my staff would be a mistake.
I really think it should be the combined effort everywhere, so the same message is told 3 times maybe, but to me that transparent, clear, everyone's got the same message.
Roadshow.
Great. Now, I think I can hand back to our chair to close out the meeting, unless anyone else has got anything else to say. From my perspective, thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure to get involved, and I think you've got the foundations of something really strong here. But I think, as Councillor Thompson's pointed out, it's not going to be easy, and funding is going to be key. So good luck. And over to our chair.
Thank you, Peter and Rowan. I mean, it has been a pleasure to have you here, and you've certainly made our job easier in terms of the process and how you rolled it out. So really appreciate it. So we're looking forward to the outcome here. And you've got Glenn Crowther.
Yeah, I was just going to raise one issue, which is I know staff have been working full on with a whole range of things, but I'm aware, particularly from a TCC point of view, we'll have some decisions to make in the annual plan process that are probably of a different scale, perhaps, to what regional is needing to make around transport in it. So that fits in a wider context that you'll all be familiar with as experienced councillors around there and staff. So for me, the pace that we do this is quite important, and because it'll be us feeding a bit into here, but initially I think we'll be getting a lot of learning from this and trying to see what the alignment needs to be, what the priorities need to be within transport, but we have to have time to feed that into our annual plan conversations that are taking place starting next week. And I think that's going to be a really important thing if we want to actually factor in transport in an informed way into those discussions, because at the moment I don't think we have a mechanism to really ensure that we have a strategic view of that. So I just thought I'd throw that in. I'm not trying to put unrealistic expectations, but if you have a choice between, oh, we could do this moderately quickly or very quickly, I'll be in the camp that says let's do it very quickly without compromising anything.
Thank you, Glenn. Sorry. Any final closing comments from any members or staff here? So thanks again, and we'll close the workshop. Thank you all members and staff. It has been great. And may this committee continue to work in harmony for the next, 12 months anyway, and beyond that.